Greetings, colleagues from Tampa. My sermon today is called You Can Run, But You Can't Hide, and it's taken from 2 Samuel chapter 12, verses 1 through 9, and Psalm 51. A few years ago, the New York Times reported something unusual that happened at a storefront in Manhattan. Two women, dressed in white, asked people to unburden their souls. The first woman would silently flag the attention of someone passing by and point them to words that had been stenciled on the window of a storefront. Air your dirty laundry, 100% confidential, anonymous, free. She would then extend a clipboard with a blank sheet of paper and an envelope stamped confidential. Hundreds took that clipboard, executives and secretaries, couriers and street people, shoppers and joggers would pause to write down their sins and their secrets, seal it in an envelope, and hand it back to her. Meanwhile, the second woman, Susan, would abstractly sketch the portraits of those who had stopped to divulge their inner secrets. When people were well out of sight, the envelope would be opened and the message would be taped to the window for all to see. The portraits were posted as well. Those who came by read the confessions of the strangers before adding their own. Some of them were silly, and some of them were terrible. The hermit crab was still alive when I threw it down the trash chute, wrote one lady. I want to see SUVs explode. These people are so selfish, wrote another. As the day progressed, the once empty glass of the storefront was papered like a wall of guilt. I'm dating a married man and getting financial compensation for it. I am 25 and he's a millionaire. Or another simply said, I have AIDS. This little storefront revealed many things, but the inescapable fact that surfaced across all generations, income levels, and social standings was that a lot of people are hiding. They are hiding from police and parents. They are hiding from coaches or teachers. Some are hiding from bosses, and others are hiding things from their spouses. And many people today are hiding things from God. Just like this storefront experiment showed, David was also hiding. David was hiding from God, and Nathan is about to call him out. But let's look first to see how things got so out of control. The traumatic story of David's demise is now in full swing. He has slept with Bathsheba, and after finding out that she is pregnant, had her husband murdered, and then calmly attributed the death of Uriah to the fortunes of war. The messiness continues. When the wife of Uriah heard that her husband was dead, she made lamentation for him. When this was over, David sent and added her to his house. She became his wife and bore him a son. Afternoon TV soap operas have nothing on this twisted tale. So now Nathan is about to reveal to David that it's time to stop hiding things from God. It's time to come clean. And when we are accountable to God, we can hide nothing from him. First of all, the Lord sent Nathan to reveal David's sin. We don't know how Nathan knew all of this, but he was a prophet after all. And prophets have insight, and as a prophet, he was required to confront sin. Some time had passed, and David had become so insensitive to his sin that he didn't realize that he was the rich man. He was the villain in Nathan's story. You see, quite often, the qualities we condemn in others are our own character flaws. Which friends or family members do you find easy to criticize and hard to accept? Instead of trying to change them, we must ask God to help us understand their feelings and see our flaws more clearly. Perhaps in that process we may discover that in condemning others, we might be condemning ourselves. This story that we find here in 2 Samuel was also very helpful in reminding us to recognize the Nathans in our lives. It's important to have in our lives people who will be honest with us when we are out of line. We all need mentors who are not afraid to put things into perspective when we need it most. It's hard work to mend our relationship with God when we have sinned. It takes a lot of courage to do this, and oftentimes we can't do it alone. We all need a Nathan. Who has God put into your life to serve as an anchor, a counselor, or a mentor? Or to whom might you be serving as a Nathan? Let me assure you that God will intentionally place people in our lives to help us stay accountable to Him. Because David was so blinded by his sin, Nathan uses the parable of the ewe lamb to make his point. And while many people might think that David's sin is all about sex, it very well could be about the abuse of power, the power that David held, and about knowing when we have enough and about being satisfied with what we have. Look what Nathan says in verse 8. If everything the Lord had given to you were too little, God would have given you much more. And then his question, why have you despised the word of the Lord to do what is evil in God's sight? It's pretty clear that Nathan is convicting David here of his arrogant abuse of power and his insatiable need for more. First of all, his abuse of power. He was the king, and Bathsheba was one of his subjects. That's abusing power. He also asserted his power to place Uriah in the front lines where he was killed. And as far as greed, David had absolutely everything that he ever needed, and yet he didn't stop until he had that was not his for the taking. And we look at David and we cast our judgment and we breathe a sigh of relief, for that isn't you, or it isn't me. Or is it? You see, I suspect that when we walk away from all the elements of sex and murder, this story becomes one that is way more familiar. We understand we too have a role in this narrative. I suspect that if we dig a little bit deeper into the text and look truthfully at our own lives, we understand how quickly and how easily we can become a David. For who among us has not abused power or used our privilege for personal gain at one time or another? It happens in big ways for sure, but it also happens in a million different small ways. Or who among us does not struggle with understanding when enough is enough? Just tune in to your favorite TV channel on any given day, and you pretty easily see that every one of the commercials are created to tap into our mentality of scarcity. We don't have enough, or we're not good enough. You need a better car, one that really defines you. You need a better body. Try this diet, take this pill. Even your children should be smarter. Buy this product to make that happen. There's never enough, and so we chase the illusions of needing more, having more, and being better. It's hard. However, the good news of our faith is that we are children of a God who abounds in love and forgiveness and grace. The message Jesus himself came to deliver is that there is no sin too deep or too wide that God cannot overcome. Jesus said and continues to say, "You are enough." Jesus taught and continues to teach that it is not about power. Rather, he says, the meek shall inherit the earth. And Jesus proclaimed, and he continues to proclaim, that it is not about material wealth. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Rather, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. You see, we are all reminded in this text that you are that man, or I am that woman, but we are the children of God, and therefore no one, not one of us, nobody can ever fall from the grace of God. Rather, we fall into it. What will it take for you and for me to stop chasing illusions? And what do we need to change so that you and I can clearly hear Jesus saying, you, my friend, are enough? Now let's jump over to Psalm 51. According to the title of this psalm, David composed this psalm as a result of Nathan the prophet convicting him of his sins. This slice out of David's life teaches us something very important. The very best of us fail. And like David, we all have something that we deeply regret, we are ashamed of, or something that has changed us. Like the people in Manhattan, David writes out his private confession. But unlike those confessions offered to the people of New York, David offers his to God. And get this, his confessional prayer marks out a few steps towards spiritual recovery that we can take today. These steps will put us in a spiritual position for God to do his work in our life again. First of all, we need to take responsibility for our sin. Notice that David doesn't fall into the self-justifying trap of shifting the blame. He doesn't say, I was just having a bad day or the devil made me do it. The second, he comes clean. And that's our second thing. Take responsibility for your sin. Number 2, come clean. He doesn't rationalize or minimize what he did. He got real. He lived in denial for a while before he reached the point. But once he realized he hadn't fooled God, he stopped playing games. The third thing we need to do is we need to ask and receive God's forgiveness. Tucked into the first expressions of David's confession, we read, Be gracious to me, O God, blot out my rebellion. Wash away my guilt and cleanse me from my sin. He wants what only God can accomplish, to be totally forgiven. And that brings us to number 4. Ask for renewal and to be transformed through God's grace. Now clean, David wants to sense again what has not been there for a long time, the presence of God in his life. And then finally, number 5, resolve to use your past failures for the glory of God. David said, God, I want to get back in the game. I want this to be useful for your purposes so that I can say to someone thinking like I was thinking, look, it's not worth it. I've been there and I have scars to prove it. There is a better way. Friends, like David, we must all come clean. God sees it all. And today is that day. All of David's power, prestige, and position could not excuse him from his sin. Only God can pardon us when we've blown it big time. And He will pardon us if you allow Him to. You simply need to ask. Amen.